There was a large building, not unlike a conference center, with an enormous trapezoid glass and steel roofed entrance, tempered reinforced glass panes measuring at least 5 feet by 5 feet square that were housed by rectangular steel gridding that had been painted white, at least 3 stories high, created an archway, so after someone had entered through the main doors, they would begin their ascension of the 3 sets of carpeted stairs, which in themselves were minimum 90 feet wide, with a white double railing bisecting them into what would probably be foot traffic moving an upward or downward path. There had to be elevators somewhere, Roger thought. Not that he needed to or even wanted to take an elevator, he just didn't see any. And each of the continuous 3 sets of stairs was themselves bisected with a short flat section, more than likely the architect giving the consumer a break or possibly a safety concern in the unlikely event of a fall. Stopping about a little less than halfway up, Roger turned to look. The carpeting was dark maroon with similarly tinted irregular shapes of yellow, dark blue, and dark green. While ascending the stairs, he had noticed the irregularities, but it wasn't until he turned could he see the pattern. He assumed some machine had made it, visually matching one orange line to another more than 100 feet away, then double-checking that both had the same red under them and the same dark green to the right, confirming his suspicion. He continued his journey upward after reaching the top of the stairs, and to himself remarking the glass pane ceiling was still a good 20 feet above his head. He began to walk toward the all-white steel door that would take him to the interior of the rest of the building. Once beyond the door, in a kind of elevated hallway, there were clear panes of glass on the left and right side to prevent people from falling off to the area below, which was more than a 20-foot drop. Those panes were topped with silver painted and polished railing, as was the motif for the experience of the visitor. Trekking deeper and deeper into the building, there were other people infrequently, but the building being so massive it felt casual to never be closer than 90 foot or so, and the people were so few and far between that was never more than a cursory glance to acknowledge each other's presence. He didn't really have a destination, and was following his curiosity and sense of exploration. Turning left on a whim, he went through a single door, and down half a set of much narrower stairs that turned left away from the door, then back right after a flat section to move in a direction adjacent to where the previous door was. Already facing getting towards an even smaller hallway with more frequent but smaller doors, the carpet changed to tile. An expensive-looking linoleum, but linoleum nevertheless. Roger felt like he could inherently follow a soft guideline of zoning codes from other buildings he had been in, and though he had no proof, he suspected down that hallway far enough would be a messy administrative room, a set of double doors to a loading dock, possibly some employee lockers, and maybe some cheap vending machines. In addition, and following a hunch, he turned right where he saw a higher and lower double set of drinking fountains, and where there were drinking fountains there was plumbing, and where there was plumbing, it was cheaper to put bathrooms. He followed the hallway on intuition, and eventually was rewarded with the exterior doors, one for men and one for women. The property had taken some liberties with the universal signage, still effectively communicated, but a new graphic design, as if to improve on a decades-old instruction. Roger pushed open the door to the men's room, and saw a hugely wide-open space. In fact, his eyes were so drawn to a gradually widening S-curve downward slope catwalk to a viewing balcony of sorts, he, without actually looking, felt like the walls and ceilings were too far away to be seen. What he could see, and his eyes were drawn to and somewhat locked on, was to either side of the viewing balcony was a drop of about 10 feet, to a sparsely but very brightly, if not spotly lit room, with gym shower room tiles, and on the left of the viewing balcony were 2 to 3 shower heads on the walls, which were an off beige, matching the tile on the floor, with slight depressions on the floor leading to dark green industrial plastic drains. On the floor on the opposite side of the viewing balcony, on the wall closest to the raised platform, were 2 to 3 urinals, and behind and away from them the tiled floor gradually descended toward a few inches lower in elevation, to go under the catwalk that had led Roger there, and he could only assume connected the shower side of the room, he surmised, and possibly lockers, or a gym in another room over, though he didn't particularly want to check. He realized suddenly that there was no immediate access to the showers or urinals, and most likely the building's designer had intended him to go back the way he came, through several more doors, get lost in the building, and find the proper entrance. Roger had no intention of being compliant, and immediately supported himself and his trajectory with his right hand firmly atop the silver railing, made more than a little, but no great effort, to jump over it, and his body passed the plane of space where the railing was. Time slowed, or was it gravity? Either way, he was almost casually looking left, then right, then left again, at his new and constantly changing surroundings. He had plenty of time to look and reconcile with the thought, will I make it past the urinals to land on the tile? And the answer himself should be fine. During his slow motion fall, he reminded himself to be patient, because somehow he knew, though he was falling slowly, he could just as easily slowly get hurt if he didn't stay focused on the task at hand. He locked his eyes a few inches in front of where he expected his feet to land, and made a mental note. Even if it feels like 8 minutes, his eyes weren't leaving that spot till he made contact, and though he could reconcile his lungs probably weren't actually moving, his thoughts felt like they were doing patient inhales and slow exhales. Several phases of his descent had already passed, and he felt like a time-lapse picture with slow fades, each existence anticipating the impact, but recognizing multiple existences were occurring at once. The floor was getting closer to his feet, and his feet were getting closer to the floor, still slowly, but recognizing he was running out of time. He relaxed and bent his knees up in a soft pre-bracing position. His feet hit the floor, remarkably flat, and he felt time begin to reassert its gradual acceleration toward a normal pace. From the soles of his shoes first, the initial impact went through his nervous system surprisingly quickly. Then slowly, he began to tense his calves, then his lower quadriceps. His hips began to protest as they sank past what a standing position would be. Then some muscles in his back contorted and his shoulders pushed forward slightly, and he felt each of his fingers spread a small amount away from each other. The process was so gradual, he could, though not very accurately, try to gauge how long the descent of his joints would last, where the descent would stop, and when and how he would begin to straighten his body into a full upright position again. The balls and heels of his feet began to sting, and though he knew the pain could be a great deal more, or even somewhat less, he understood in the back of his mind how much it was given the spread out chronological nature of what was occurring. Being tolerant and accepting of his layered and predictable foot pain, he knew what to expect for his knees and thighs. That was inevitable, but at the same time completely tolerable. His hips reaching their lowest point, he was already bracing for the incoming discomfort and pain. Beginning the process of recovering in erect position, he felt the pain wash over him and then leave in waves, blurring his already locked and difficult to discern vision. He could have continued the process eyes closed, but it wasn't really an option. As the differential layers of existence began to speed up their oscillations and become closer to one another, beyond the point of will I fall, a ways to go before is it over. His eyes, first time in what seemed like eternity, began to leave the spot on the floor. Assured they didn't need to be there anymore, his awareness of his body, including his vision, was evenly distributed. At this point in his recognition of existence, and different moments in time were getting closer and speeding up with some overlap. Just as he recognized there were few enough of those perceptions to try to be cognizant of and think about trying to count, his body was 90% straight up, and his consciousness came back together with a jarring snap. He looked around, almost as a response to wonder where his other streams of thought had gone. He was near the urinals, and though he knew the entire building was fairly new, it was an immaculately clean space. He retreated to the dark passage under the catwalk and found the door in the dark and exited through it, almost separating himself from all of his other existences that had tried to escape in a moment on that timeline. The next room was full of light, and the ceiling and walls were plainly visible, rendering Roger completely present and more aware of his surroundings than of himself.